In the year 1883, I, Dr. Watson, was living once again at Baker Street with my friend Sherlock Holmes. It was early morning when a young lady, pale and anxious, arrived at our door. Her trembling hands and frightened eyes showed that she had come to us in great distress. Her name was Miss Helen Stoner. She explained that she lived with her stepfather, Dr. Grimsby Roylott, a violent and hot-tempered man who had once practiced medicine in India. After her mother's death, Helen and her twin sister Julia had been left in Dr. Roylott's care. The inheritance from their mother gave them a small fortune, which they were to receive upon marriage. 2 years earlier, her sister Julia had been about to be married. But on the very night before the wedding, she had died in a mysterious and dreadful way. Helen described that her sister had come to her room, trembling with fear. Julia whispered of hearing strange low whistles in the middle of the night. Later, Helen heard a scream. When she rushed to Julia's room, she found her sister in agony, pointing to the ceiling and crying out, "It was the Speckled Band," before falling dead. The doctors could find no cause of death. There were no marks of violence, no signs of poison. The mystery remained unsolved. Now, 2 years later, Helen herself was engaged to be married. But in recent weeks, she too had begun to hear the same strange low whistle at night. She was terrified that she might meet the same fate as her sister Julia. Out of desperation, she had come to Sherlock Holmes, begging for help. Holmes listened intently, his sharp eyes fixed on Helen's pale face. He asked her many precise questions, about the house, her stepfather's habits, and the details of her sister's death. Helen explained that Dr. Roylott was a violent man, feared by servants and neighbors alike. He kept strange animals from India, cheetahs and baboons, roaming freely around the estate. Holmes leaned back, his eyes shining with interest. "Your story is most intriguing, Miss Stoner," he said quietly. "There is, indeed, danger in your house. But fear not. We shall uncover the truth of this speckled band. Dr. Watson, prepare yourself, we have work to do." The following day, Sherlock Holmes and I set out with Miss Helen Stoner to visit her family estate, Stoke Moran, where she lived with her stepfather, Dr. Grimsby Roylott. The countryside was quiet and grey as our carriage moved along the narrow lanes, but Helen's face remained pale with fear. As we approached the old house, I could see at once that it was a building in decline. The roof was broken in places, the walls weather-stained, and the garden overrun with weeds. Only one side of the house seemed to be in repair, and it was here that Helen explained her stepfather occupied his chambers. Next to his room was Helen's own, and beside hers, the room that had once belonged to her late sister Julia. Holmes insisted on examining the details carefully. He asked Helen to show us Julia's room first. The chamber was simple but peculiar in its arrangement. The bed was fastened to the floor, unable to be moved. Just above it, on the wall, there was a ventilator that connected not to the outside air, but strangely enough, to the adjoining room, Dr. Roylott's chamber. Holmes's eyes grew sharp as he noted this detail. "A ventilator that leads into another room, and a bed nailed to the floor," he murmured. "That is most suggestive, Watson." On the wall beside the bed hung a cord, which at first glance seemed to be for ringing a bell to call servants. Yet when Holmes pulled it, no sound was heard. He examined it closely and declared, "This is no bell rope. It is a dummy, simply a cord fastened here for some hidden purpose." We then stepped into Dr. Roylott's adjoining room. It was furnished heavily, with a large iron safe in the corner, a wooden chair, and a small dish of milk on the floor. Holmes's attention fixed on the milk. "Strange," he whispered. "What use could Dr. Roylott have for milk, with no cat or dog in the house?" Before we could study further, heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. The door swung open and in strode Dr. Grimsby Roylott himself. He was a tall, powerful man, with a broad chest and cruel, yellowish eyes. A hunting whip hung from his hand, and his face was flushed with anger. "So," he thundered, "you dare to interfere in my affairs." His gaze fell upon Holmes with burning hatred. You are Sherlock Holmes, I presume. I know your meddling ways. Keep out of my business, or you will suffer for it. Holmes, calm and unmoved, met his gaze without a word. Roylott's face twisted with fury. He struck his cane hard against the wall, then turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The blow had bent the iron poker that hung by the fireplace. I could not hide my alarm, but Holmes only smiled slightly. He picked up the bent poker, and with one sharp twist of his hand, straightened it again. Watson, he said softly, that man is indeed dangerous. But violence is often the mask of weakness. The more he threatens, the more certain I am that we are close to the truth. Helen clutched her hands tightly. Mr. Holmes, will you help me? I feel the danger grows worse with every passing night. Holmes reassured her. You must remain calm, Miss Stoner. Tonight, Dr. Watson and I shall keep watch in your sister's old room. Whatever dark secret lurks within these walls, we shall face it. That night, as darkness fell over Stoke Moran, Holmes and I returned quietly to the estate. Miss Stoner greeted us nervously, her eyes full of fear. Holmes spoke gently to her, but his words carried firmness. You must follow my instructions exactly, he said. Tonight, you will sleep in a different room, far from this wing of the house. Lock the door and let no one in until morning. Leave the rest to us. Helen nodded, though her hands trembled. She slipped away silently, and soon the house grew quiet. The servants had gone to bed, and Dr. Roylott's heavy footsteps echoed once in the corridor before his chamber door shut firmly. Holmes and I waited until all was still. Then, in complete darkness, we crept into Julia's old room, the chamber where the mystery had begun. The air was cold and heavy, the silence broken only by the faint rustle of night outside. Holmes inspected the bed once more, running his fingers along the nailed frame, then gazing at the dummy bell rope that hung near it. His face, usually calm, now bore a look of deep concentration. Watson, he whispered, remember what you observe here tonight. Your nerves may be tested, but remain steady. Our lives may depend upon it. We extinguished our lamps and sat in silence. I could feel the stillness pressing around us, broken only by the ticking of my watch. Hours dragged by. The wind rattled faintly at the shutters, and somewhere outside, a strange cry echoed through the night, perhaps the call of Roylott's wandering baboon. Holmes sat rigid in his chair, his eyes fixed on the bell rope. Not once did he stir. I confess, my heart beat fast, for the memory of Julia Stoner's dying scream haunted me as I waited in the dark. Suddenly, shortly after midnight, a faint sound reached our ears. It was a soft hiss, low, steady, and sinister. My skin grew cold, for it was unlike any sound I had ever heard. Holmes's hand shot up in warning, signaling silence. Then, from the direction of the ventilator, there came another faint noise, a gentle metallic scrape, followed once more by that soft hissing. My eyes strained in the darkness, and I could just make out the pale cord of the bell rope trembling slightly. Holmes leapt from his chair, his hand striking fiercely at the rope with his cane. A sudden, dreadful cry pierced the silence. A scream of pain and terror, so wild and unnatural that it froze my very blood. From beyond the wall came the crash of furniture overturned, followed by a terrible silence. Holmes sprang to his feet, his face pale but resolute. Watson, he whispered urgently, come. The time has come to end this dreadful mystery. Holmes rushed from Julia's old chamber, and I followed close behind. We hurried into Dr. Roylott's room, from where the dreadful cry had come. The sight before us froze me in horror. Dr. Grimsby Roylott lay dead in his chair. His eyes were wide with terror, his face twisted in agony. Around his brow was wound a creature so strange and fearful that I stepped back in shock. That it was a snake, its body coiled tightly, its head raised high, hissing with menace. The markings on its scales formed strange yellow speckles that gleamed in the dim light. Holmes's voice was calm, though firm, as he spoke. The Speckled Band, he said. The very words Julia Stoner uttered before her death. Holmes seized the poker and drove the serpent back through the ventilator, returning it to the room from which it had come. For a moment there was silence. Then Holmes turned to me gravely. "Roylott is dead. The creature he trained has destroyed him." I stood speechless, my eyes still fixed on the lifeless figure of that cruel man. Holmes explained, "Roylott kept this snake, one of the deadliest from India. He trained it to pass through the ventilator, down the bell rope, and onto the bed of his stepdaughters. Each night he released it, whistling softly to recall it when its task was done. With this trick, he could kill without leaving a mark. Julia died by its venom. Helen would have suffered the same fate, had we not intervened." We stood in silence for some minutes, the weight of the discovery pressing heavily upon us. The truth was dark, but undeniable. Dr. Roylott, desperate to keep control of his stepdaughter's inheritance, had turned to murder. His plan was simple and terrible, Holmes continued. If the sisters married, he would lose much of the money he controlled. By sending the snake through the ventilator, he created a weapon none could trace. The cry of the Speckled Band was Julia's dying attempt to describe the creature she saw. I shuddered as I recalled Helen's trembling voice earlier that day, her fear of meeting the same fate. Without Holmes's keen observation, the ventilator, the nailed bed, the false bell rope, she too might now lie cold and lifeless. Holmes's eyes grew thoughtful. Roylott's own violence has turned upon him. He sought to kill, but it is he who has perished by his own wicked device. There is a strange justice in that, Watson. I could only nod, still shaken by the night's events. At last Holmes laid a hand on my shoulder. "Come, my friend. Our work here is done. Miss Stoner is safe, and the mystery is solved. The Speckled Band will trouble no one again." And so we left Stoke Moran, leaving behind the crumbling house, the roaming beasts, and the memory of one of the most dreadful cases we had ever faced. To this day, the words echo in my mind, the dying cry of Julia Stoner, and the dreadful truth it revealed. As we departed from Stoke Moran, the chill of the night seemed to cling to us. Our carriage rattled along the lonely country road, but my thoughts remained fixed upon the dreadful sight of Dr. Roylott's lifeless body. The memory of the snake coiled upon him sent a shiver through me even now. Holmes, however, sat calm and thoughtful. His keen eyes stared into the darkness, and at last he spoke. "Watson, every case teaches us something. This one reveals how greed may twist a man into something less than human. Roylott's mind was sharp enough to devise a scheme of murder that left no trace. Yet in his pride, he failed to see the flaw, that danger obeys no master forever." I nodded slowly, still troubled. It was fate, perhaps, that the very creature he trusted should turn upon him. Holmes gave a faint smile. "Not fate, Watson, logic. The deadliest schemes are those which balance upon the smallest detail. One false move, and they collapse. Roylott set a serpent upon his stepdaughter, yet forgot that serpents strike without loyalty. His cruelty bred his own destruction. The night grew quieter as London drew near. I could not shake the image of Helen Stoner's pale face when we told her the truth. Her gratitude had been deep, yet her sorrow for her sister lingered. I knew she would never forget the words, "the Speckled Band." The following morning, as we sat once more at Baker Street, Holmes filled his pipe and leaned back in his chair. The fog of London drifted past the window, but my mind was still heavy with the events at Stoke Moran. Holmes broke the silence. "You looked shaken last night, Watson. Cases such as these are never easy." "I confess," I replied, "that the cry of Dr. Roylott still echoes in my ears. And yet, I cannot help but think. Had we not been there, Miss Stoner would surely have perished." "True," said Holmes. "And it is for that reason alone that we risk ourselves in such matters. To protect the innocent is our duty, though justice may sometimes come in grim forms. Roylott's death was not of our making, it was the work of his own design. We merely held the mirror up to his crime. Holmes's voice grew quieter. "Watson, mark this, when one builds upon cruelty, the structure always falls. The world may call it chance, but it is in truth the balance of nature." I watched the smoke curl upward, forming strange patterns in the lamplight. Once again, I marveled at Holmes's calm reasoning in the face of horrors that left other men trembling. Time passed, and the case of the Speckled Band became one more tale in the long record of Holmes's investigations. Yet of all the cases I have written, few strike me with such dread when I recall them. Miss Helen Stoner found safety at last, freed from the shadow of her stepfather's cruelty. She went on to live her life in peace, though the memory of her sister could never be erased. As for Holmes, he spoke little more of the matter. But I remember clearly his final words on that dreadful night. "Watson, this case reminds us that truth, no matter how well hidden, will one day reveal itself. The human mind may weave clever lies, yet the smallest clue will tear them apart. It is in whispers, not shouts, that secrets are betrayed." I closed my notebook, reflecting on his words. The night's terrors faded slowly, but the lesson remained. The Speckled Band, those final, desperate words of a dying woman, had led us into one of the darkest corners of human greed. And though justice had come in a strange and terrible form, it had come all the same. And so ended one of the most singular adventures of Sherlock Holmes.